See, this is where these verses come into play. Romans 12:2. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye what? Transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is where this verse comes into play. Philippians 4:8. We stopped right before that. Finally, my brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. God's not just trying to fill up a page or make a little letter a little bit longer for a group of people in Philippi. He's telling us truth that will change our lives if we'll listen and obey. Renewing the mind. Renewing the mind. Thinking on these things. Let's get back to the story, right? Here's how all of our story began. Wow, where does the time go? All of our story began in a garden, where a man and a woman created by God was placed in this beautiful place. God created from the first day to the sixth day. He said it was good. On the seventh day, he sums it all up and he says, man, it's very good. All this is very good. And then he plants a garden and he places man in that garden. And in that garden, God walks with man in the cool of every day. He has this interaction, and all man knows, the only story Adam knew. Oh, Lord. Help those who need to hear this, hear this. The only story that Adam knew was the story God told him daily in the garden. That's the only story he knew. And he was in a place called Eden, which means pleasure. Means pleasure. So, the serpent comes along in chapter 3 and says to Eve, hath God said? He casts doubt on God's story. He casts doubt on God's story, and Eve buys into the doubt, eats of the tree, gives it to Adam. Adam eats of the tree, and their story is forevermore altered. They realize that they are naked, and they hide themselves. And God showed up like he always does to tell the daily story. And he says, where are you? Where are you? He said, I heard your voice in the garden. I was afraid and I hid myself. God's story is always a good story. God's story is always a good story. But some of you this morning are believing a different story. We get frustrated and we say, why don't people learn from history? Because we don't learn from history. Man can't learn from history. It's only when his story merges with his story that the story is re-altered. Consequently, quick side note, I just throw it out here for you to chew on during Thanksgiving. Remember in a garden where Jesus was buried. On the third day he arose, and Mary Magdalene was looking for the Lord. And she come face to face with the Lord and thought he was. It was in the garden where God told the stories at the beginning. Every day, that was Adam's story. That got wrecked, that got altered because of sin and disobedience. But Christ died for me. He was buried and he rose again, and he appears as a gardener. And if we'll let him, if we'll let him have control of that little hippocampus, it will impact that amygdala and all that aggression and all that anxiety. Shh. It's quiet.